And we're live. What's up, Kingdom of Rock? This is Matt Gibson, and we're here today with our panel of awesome people. Here to my right, my left, somewhere, the guy up at the top there, Mr. Michael Melinda.
This is hard to. Hey, I finally got it right. Look at that. It's backwards. It's opposite world. So that.
Well, hey, all you need to know is he's live from San Francisco, California, the rock and roll capital of the world. Wait a minute. No, that's not true. Where is the rock and roll capital of the world? Has anybody ever figured that out?
I think that's the way to start a bar fight, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to get in that one.
Yeah.
I heard it was Fort Wayne, Indiana, but I don't know if that's true or not. But that's just what I heard. Anyway, well, and today we also have an awesome guest, a good friend of mine. Speaking of rock and roll capital of the world, was Ramstein Air Force Base, I think. Or no, we were at Pope together.
We were both.
We were at Ramstein.
We were both.
We were at both.
We were Ramstein.
Right. We were at both.
We were Ramstein and then Pope as I was getting out. Yep.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to have my friend William Johnson. Do you go by Will or William? I called him Will in the Air Force, but
still Will. Yeah.
Still Will. Okay, cool. So Will Johnson is an amazing percussionist. He can do all kinds of stuff with his hands. And he's also an educator. He's got a successful YouTube channel. He just hit over 1 million views on one of his channels. He's actually getting one of his other channels up, which we're going to talk about that today. Will Johnson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sirs. Thank you, everyone. Good to be here.
Yay.
Will, a lot of people here on Kingdom of Rock maybe have not heard of you yet. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your journey as an artist and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on the show. I'm a long time, but Matt has known me since I was almost a teenager, I think. So that goes back. Well, we won't say how long ago that was. It was a couple decades ago. But yeah, I've been into music. I started off as a dancer in hip hop probably about 30 years ago as a kid, as a teenager. And I just always loved Latin music and different types of music, in Latin America and West Africa. And so later on, after dancing for so many years, I wanted to learn how to play, the drums that were central to the types of music that I loved listening to, even though I grew up with just about, everything from James Taylor to Tribe Called Quest. But I loved salsa. I loved mambo, cha-cha, rumba from Cuba, Cuban music and music from the island where my grandparents on my mom's side are from, Puerto Rico. So I wanted to learn more about that side of my family. So I started studying Latin percussion. And then that ended up leading into, while I was in the Air Force, I actually was studying and I started playing percussion and then started going to this church where I was stationed at. And then that got me into playing gospel. I was already playing a lot of soul and R&B, but then I started getting really into various types of gospel and blues and jazz. And I started off with the congas. And to make a long story short, then, when you play percussion, you're often, especially where I'm at, I'm in the Southeast. And even though I traveled a lot from here in the Southeast, you kind of have to play a lot of different percussion instruments. So you got to play some drum set, play some timbales, play some bongos, play chimes, especially if you're doing pop music. You got to do a little bit of everything. So, but I've always loved world percussion. So later on, I started studying Middle Eastern music, started taking lessons with East Indian, tabla, got into West African drumming. And I just love collecting. I love learning about the history and, being a percussionist, then you start meeting, doing a lot of sideman stuff. Then I started finding my way into producing and, getting with other musicians that are band leaders and helping them with their projects. So, but I was, I was a tradesman for many years and music was it was like a passion or hobby. And later on, I decided to get back into school, finish my degree. And in the process of that, going to pursue music full time. So.
And you're doing it full time right now, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah, thank you. It's a grind, man.
Yeah. Well, speaking of grinds, when you have so much of an armory at your disposal, say I'm a pop artist who wants a hire you as a percussionist. How do you cast what to use, whether it's a tabla or a timbali or a conga? I mean, how do you listen to a tune and go, this is the perfect spice for this?
Sometimes it's easy in the sense of it's like anything else for me, like listening to the artist, just getting to know what they want. It's all about, what kind of style, what genre they're in, the context, asking them for some references. If there's references, then there's a formula right there. They might be a pop artist, but then they're heavily influenced by Sade, and they're saying, I'm going for a Sting and the Police vibe on this album, their early days. And so you're like, okay, got it. I kind of see where we're going. So that gives me a roadmap. But at the same time, coming from the world that I come in percussion, the difficulty is sometimes not giving too much to the artist, and then they're overwhelmed. It sounds busy, and they ask for a little bit of color, and then I give them 30 tracks of of percussion because I just this will be cool. This will be cool.
There's kind of a famous quote by the Tower of Power Horns. I think they were doing a Rod Stewart session or something, and they went in there and they just loved it, and then they were just about to leave, and Rod said, hey, what if we put more horns on this part? And they said by the time we were done, we had absolutely ruined the track. There were horns everywhere, and it was horrible. They hated it.
Wow. Yeah, easy to do, and I think that's the most difficult thing to do, is just to try to figure out, if it is 3 items, what do I do? So sometimes it just happens. It just falls in your lap, and you're done. I think that's just a matter of experience, right? But then there's other times where it's just like, I need to sit on this for a few hours or a couple days or however long the artist has, for their deadline. So, yeah.
Because I would imagine, like, as far as doing percussion as a counterpoint, you've got a drum kit, kick, snare, let's say 8ths on the hi-hat or something. Is it pretty natural to you how to figure out what to fill in? Or as you just mentioned, does sometimes it take you a little while to figure out where the optimum space to add your bit?
That, for me, that's always been a natural thing, I guess, because I came from, at least schooling wise, being one of many percussionists. So I'm used to finding my space. And then even, from the Afro-Cuban and the various Latin American genres, as well as the gospel world, even, and in soul is in the similar idea or vein. You're used to just finding your space, and just going for it. But at the same time, the difficulty for me later on was I didn't actually start with the drum set. Whereas a lot of guys will play and start on the drum set, the trap set, and then go to percussion.
Right.
I actually started as a conga player, and then started people calling me to be the percussionist. So then learning what was the traditional role of the drum set, I think that's where playing with drummers helped. But then I had to figure out and get inside of the drummer's head. Okay, this is why he's playing the hi-hat. So if a singer-songwriter comes to me, then I have to figure out, if they're coming to me, do you want these conventional sounds and just different timbres? Or is it that you actually want something completely different? So that can sometimes be the hard part.
It's kind of like sprinkles versus like icing. Like, do you want sprinkles or like just, this is like bump, dun, 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 dun. Do you want me to emulate that on the drums? Right.
Exactly. Because I could do that. I could do straight back beats and just have it a different organic sound. Or it could be more like, if I reference like a Stuart Copeland or something and take away the backbeat in certain places and just kind of give that vibe, we could totally do that and be a little more esoteric. You can be as esoteric as you want, but that's kind of the scary thing though, when you press send to that client, right? You might just say, do what you do, man. And you're like,
right. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me also where, in the 60s where they had arrangers back then, you'd have somebody who would, arrange a tambourine part or arrange a conga part or whatever. And there's a lot of records where if you put your headphones on, you go, well, I didn't know there was a something percussive in there. And then you kind of got to the point where everybody had sampling and everybody considered themselves a great percussionist. Oh, I've got a tabla sample. I'll just throw this in. And some better at it than others, but it kind of, now you working today have to negotiate that whole thing of the classic era, which you were talking about, plus the, person working on their own, thinking they know what good percussion is. So is it difficult sometimes if you're working with a home artist that might go, hey, here's this great part. Can you improve on this? And it's like totally not happening or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes it's a better situation than others, and most of the time it's okay. The big thing for me that I've had to learn over the years, and I'm thinking I'm finally getting a good handle on it, is just not being married to the ideas that I get for that particular artist, right? Because you might lay something down and you're like, that was fire, man,
Right.
And then the album comes out and you hear it and you're like, did I play on that? I don't know if I played on that, So it's like, so that could be a difficult thing, and then sometimes they will send you like a demo to give you an idea. And then you're knowing it's like, okay, how do I, now if they send you a demo and say, just for reference, I'm not a percussionist, then it's easy. And you might go, yeah, no problem. I'll lay some stuff down. But if they sent it and it's just like, that kind of sounds like Casio, like, I don't know if I want to play that,
Right.
But then there's times where the demo or whatever they did on the drum machine or their keyboard or whatever, their plugins actually sounds really good. I've had times where I'm like, I don't think you need me to recreate that. I think that sounds really good, and especially nowadays, some of these percussion sounds, I probably shouldn't say it, because I don't want to put myself out of a job, but some of these plugins, I mean, they're pre-mastered. So some of them sound really good, but you're right. It's the arranging. So at the end of the day, it's my creative choices. And that's really why they're calling me, because I may lay something down that they didn't think of. So I can do what they want me to do and just have it be real instruments if that they want. But then I might also say, that was cool, but let's put it on the 16th and of 2 instead of where you had it at, or something like that.
I have a question. Okay, so I got invited when I first moved to LA. I got invited to this party with all these like rock stars, right?
Okay, yeah.
And I was one of about 10 guitar players there.
Okay.
And I'm a shredder, show off on the guitar, that type of thing. And most of the people there were kind of pockety, kind of like keeping it simple. And, so my friend that invited me to the party, they're like, hey, go over there and play the guitar, And I was like, I don't really want to do that right now, because it would be like bringing attention to myself. So I was like, maybe I'll just play this hand drum. So I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Play the hand drum. So, I like Santana. I got rhythm. I can play pocket drums on a kit, I'm all right. Yeah. So I was playing. Well, I got into it. All the girls were liking it. So I was like, okay, this is good. I'm single, guys. It's cool. So I was having a good time and hamming it up with the hand drum. Well, after about an hour, I'm realizing that I'm a guitar player and my fingers are starting to look like hot dogs. And this is not a good situation. And actually, I'll tell you the second half of the story in a second, which was pretty cool. So I was playing and I was like, this cannot be good because this hurts. This is starting to hurt. And I had it in my heart, but my hands didn't have it. And so after about 2 hours, I was like, dude, I'm going to cripple myself. So I was like, who can I give this drum to? And I look over and this dude is really getting into the music and everyone's having a good time and jamming. And I was like, that guy's got rhythm. So I go to hand it to this dude and it's Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire. Right. Man. And I was like,
are you serious?
Yeah. And I looked at him and I was like, hand him the drum. And he's like, yeah, man. He took the drum and just went crazy with it. The whole room just, went bananas and stuff. I didn't even know what I was doing. It was total luck,
Well, actually, that's kind of, one of the elements of that. Because, I mean, I've played with some conga players and, a couple of them have said if they really get into it the next day, not only are their fingers kind of messed up, but they're actually kind of urinating a little bit of blood because they're bashing their fingers out. So I mean, it is kind of
Right.
dangerous sometimes to pound these things with bare skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Technique is extremely important. Technique, you know, especially if you want to be in it for the long haul, right? You know, I think
Sounded good, man. You know, I
huh?
was making it's kind of like I was forcing it. You know, you ever see people that learn how to water ski and they're just doing it by sheer willpower, but they're not really chilled out and relax, and you know they're going to be hurting big time, right?
Yep.
It's kind of like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that it just also it shows how cool Verdine it probably is. I mean, he was just having a good time. He was not like, oh, dude, you know, but he was just like,
Yeah.
hey, he loves music, loves having a good time. If you were vibing and it sounded good, it really doesn't. At the end of the day, it sounds good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a fan. I play my instrument because I love those instruments. So if I go somewhere and I hear somebody playing, I like their groove. It's all good, you know. But technique, yeah, it really is. And there's another element that happens when you play with your hands, is that the oil from your skin is leaving your body. So you don't have to put oil on natural skin heads if they're not synthetic, because it's just play them, right? That's why after a while you get dry rot if an instrument is not being played, you know, because there's no oil being placed on the drum. Some people were like, what do I oil the drum with? And it's like, well, you really don't need to do that if you're playing it, you know?
Yeah.
So the problem with that lies in, if you're playing for a few hours, that oil is leaving your skin.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's also getting dry and cracking.
Yeah.
And then later on, you can end up getting some really painful, like little, you know, cracks, splits, and then start bleeding later. But also you're doing a lot of physical activity. And if you're not drinking water, you're losing, you know, a lot of water. And there's a big discussion about the whole urinating blood thing. A lot of people will say that. I tend to believe they're not really urinating blood, but they're really dehydrated. And so their urine is extremely dark. Because I've been there. I've been there where this is probably TMI, but where my urine looked like coffee, you know, and without cream, you know, and that's a scary place to be. But, you know, that it's very physical. You're literally playing, you know, as opposed to just rebound, you know. I mean, you are supposed to use technique if you're playing congas, for instance. There is supposed to be some kind of rebound, but you have to do a lot of that through repetition and practice. So you're using all of this full body, especially if you're like you Santana. Come on. I mean, that might be Latin, but it's rock and roll too. So it's really intense, you know. Cuban music, rumba, really intense. You're going for it. So the technique is really important. I know a lot of guys from the old school, and even now, their hands after playing 30, 40 years, don't look so good. You know, they're like, so a lot of the guys though, like the Giovanni Hidalgos and others, their hands, you would think if you go to shake their hand, it's rough. It's not soft. It's actually like, wow, because of the technique, and they're taking care of, you know, themselves. You develop a little bit of callus underneath, but you learn, just like playing like with a drummer, like playing with a molar technique, you learn how to be efficient and do more with less, you know. And if you are a percussionist, not when I say percussionist, meaning not the trap set drummer, you're used to not being mic'd as much. So you've been in situations where you're trying to be heard and you pay for it later. So then you realize, if I'm in that situation now, I better chill out because I am going to pay for this. A lot of percussionists know what I'm talking about. It's like, I'm going to pay for this later. So let me chill and do a lot, make it look like I'm getting into it, but be careful of how I'm actually hitting the drum, because I'm going to pay for that tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, because I think that's, I mean, even to the point with the trap drummers where they have sticks now, I don't, you know, they're starting to get popular with these, you know, kind of sticks made out of some material that don't rebound as much, because a lot of drummers, whether they're old or young, or start their hands, you know, just from this hitting the stick, it messes them up. And I could imagine that obviously someone who's played congas for 40 years is probably, if they're not taking care of themselves, you know, a lot of bad, you know, arthritis being probably, you know, the least worrisome thing in a whole list of worrisome things that could happen to your hands.
Yeah,
so.
circulation. I mean, I have to admit, I mean, when I was younger, there was a lot of bad habits, in the first 5 or 10 years. And so when it gets really cold outside, there's issues that I pay for. And you as guitarists, you know the deal too. Sometimes you lose loss of feel in your fingers, and that's kind of scary, So, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and to get away from the scary stuff for a second, I think for a vocalist or a guitarist, phrasing is so important. And I would imagine for a percussionist too, how you attack the drum, how you lay off, how you leave the drum, what the rebound is, how you decide to phrase the beats or phrase in between them. That's kind of a pretty big decision. Do you think for most percussionists that's just a natural thing once you learn a particular style, or do you think ahead of time to chart that phrasing out?
I think it's both. I think it's really like speaking a language. It's vocabulary. The cool thing about learning in different, just like I was going to say world traditions, but really, I mean, it's the same thing if you're playing rock and roll or jazz, because there's all these traditions, and there's this lineage, right? If you come from a soul and Motown world, there's a number of fills that you have to play, especially if you're like a top 40 wedding band, vent band or whatever. So there's a number of vocabulary that you have, different phrases that you can call on at any time. And then there's something that is like subconscious, that's just a part of your vernacular that you tend to use. So if you're training and studying like Afro-Cuban music for years, or Cuban rumba, there's a lot of phrases in the soloing that you may play, or there's rhythms in different traditions that just kind of come out anyways through the music. So it starts becoming a part of your voice anyway. So when you hear a certain rhythm and you have a piece that you're commissioned to do, you may tend to want to call and response with that particular vernacular, just like in our conversation. So if you ask me a question, I have certain words in my vocabulary. I have my personality. All of these things come together and they influence the way that I respond, my life experiences, all of that. So as a conga player, as a bongo player, or whatever, you have all of those. Now, in addition to that, you're also playing with, and this is another debate amongst hand drums, but you have definite pitch and indefinite pitch. So playing congas, especially in Latin percussion, and especially in the Cuban world, you're tuning your drums often based on your scenario. So you get your ear and your pitch. And so you're playing not just rhythms, but you're thinking melodically,
Right.
And so like for me, I'm highly inspired and influenced by guitar players, especially a classical and acoustic, but also lead players, electric lead players. If he's doing a line, and I love it and I hear it a lot, that tends to go, if I've got 2 or 3 congas, I can emulate those motifs. And so for me, that's been a big part of my playing, is picking up and playing melodies while playing those rhythms. So a lot of syncopation, I guess.
It's funny. It always comes down to listening to other stuff. That they tell guitar players all the time, if you just listen to other guitar players, you're cheating yourself. You should listen to horn players or, reed players or whatever. And it's interesting to hear the same for percussion, that you look outside the percussion arts for your own inspiration.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, for instance, there's one funny little line that a lot of conga players do. I know I do it, where I might do, who was it? Was it Bugs Bunny? I think it was like so sometimes that enters in my Woody Woodpecker. That's right. Yeah. So sometimes I might do stuff like So yeah, you do lift those from all different types of instruments, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, let me ask you this. So, all right, so you've been doing sessions and playing with people and things like that, but you've also been growing a YouTube channel, or 2 YouTube channels.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with that? I know you just said your main one just hit 1 million views, and how have you built that up, and how long has it taken you?
And maybe start with your William Johnson Music Channel first, and let's talk about, Mr. Will's. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Just so we don't confuse the Kingdom of Rock out there with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. So William Johnson Music, that's my older channel. I've been trying to find a way to say this because I have a children's music channel now, and I don't want to say adult channel, right? So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
for grown-up children.
yeah. There you go.
Words are important.
Words are very important, especially in this day and age.
Yeah,
So yeah. So I don't want to be canceled, y'all. No, I'm So William Johnson Music, I was actually, along with my brother, we were both in the Air Force together, and we were kind of early adopters with the YouTube thing. And so I think it was December of 2006 actually that we started getting on YouTube and messing around, So for years I was actually running the channel that I run now, William Johnson Music. But in the beginning, I didn't really know that. I didn't have any idea of monetization as far as YouTube. I didn't think this was it was just another platform for my music or my expression. A lot of us didn't really know this thing was going to blow up the way it did. But there were waves for the first, I'll say, 2006 to probably around 2010 or 11. There was waves where I started kind of taking it a little more serious and using it for different reasons. But around 2011 and 12, I was really taking it serious and pushing it. But then I kind of got sidetracked with doing more studio stuff and just offline. But about 2 years ago, I really started taking the channel seriously and decided, I want to make this one of my main platforms, try to channel to my website, but this will be a main thing that I'm going to try to work on and not get distracted. Just take it really serious, get very organized with it. So
and immediately I noticed it when I started seeing your stuff come through. I was like, "What's he doing?" Immediately, like I could tell the point when you did that. I remember.
Wow, that's cool.
Well, and then from the, what it's hard sometimes when. Well, what am I trying to say? I'm doing what I said I wouldn't do, but which is be vague. But I hear a lot about, well, I was serious about it, or, hey, I saw this and it was awesome. And I'd like to know specifically how you decided to ramp up your channel and start positioning it for success.
Right. I like your question a lot because I used to, when we hear terms like I started taking it seriously, it took me a long time, and I'm going to explain what I meant and what I started doing. It took me a long time to realize that I really wasn't taking the channel seriously. But I had the idea and thought that I was taking it seriously. None of us, when we're really loving something, say, "Oh, I ain't taking this serious. I'm not taking this." No one's going to say that. No one's going to admit that you're not taking something serious. But the fruit, the actual actions, the day-to-day, like, did I have a plan, like an actual call to action or a mission statement? Did I have a weekly to-do list? Did I have some type of structure in how I was going to write scripts for the video, plan releases for them? When I put them out, where were they going to go? How was I going to push them? If it wasn't that if I wasn't as focused on the way they look in the production, at least was the framing good or the script good? Was there an actual brand? Like, was I branding specifically the channel, or was it a variety channel? Sometimes, like for me, before a few years, well, I'd say around 2011, 12, I was really focused on the tutorials. So I had a focus, right? But then every now and then I would do, the channel would be something like this or something over here. And it would be something that was not completely unrelated, but it wasn't like if someone said, "You have a YouTube channel," and they went to my channel, in 30 seconds, they could say, "I know what he's about." Or I could spout out to anyone on the street a 30-second commercial of what William Johnson Music on my channel is. For instance, like if you went to my channel, you'd see the banner, you'd see a little line that might say percussion. I'm not there right now, right off the top of my head, but it's like percussion tutorials, life or something like that. So, and then at the end of my videos, I tend to say similar things. So there is a brand. There is something that people can say, William Johnson, if he were to have a shirt, which I do have shirts, but I know what kind of shirt he would have.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so important because, it baffles me, in my job at, guitar player and beyond that, it's really hard to be a musician. It's really hard to be successful as a musician. And this is something that we're dealing with the Kingdom of Rock, but, how to position yourself for success, how to market yourself. And a lot of musicians don't want to do it or don't know how to do it. And I think it's interesting too, when you said, all the elements you did to get serious about your site, where does it go? How do I film it? I think sometimes a fair amount of musicians go, I'm just going to go up on YouTube and do my thing. Cause isn't it like you just get viral by chance, and then when they don't go viral, they kind of give up on it, but they never really gave themselves a chance because they didn't really focus on the brand, like you said.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of like they just chuck it on their channel. They're like, just throw it on the channel, but it's not. It's almost like a closet with a bunch of used sports gear and random instruments and clothes you don't wear anymore.
Well, and I mean, I guess that's fine if you want your grandma or your friends to go up and see what's going on. Hey, he's playing tablas today,
Right. Exactly. And I mean, so I had a friend of mine that a fellow YouTuber that I would follow for years, and I watched his channel start. It got to this point where it started evolving, and he made the statement that he started taking his channel seriously, and that stuck out to me. Now, I've heard that statement as a grown man. I've heard people say that, but for whatever reason, that stuck out to me because when he said it, it made me think of myself. And I was like, but I thought he was already taking it serious. And I thought I took it serious, but it was a conviction that hit me. And I'm like, And I started thinking about it, and I was like, okay, Will, not that this is a bad thing if it's not your thing, but maybe you're not really taking the channel seriously. And maybe you just haven't given it enough time. A lot of people have, and I've heard this quoted somewhere, a lot of people have the things they need, the resources and the skills, but they just don't give themselves enough time for it to happen. Ideas are easy. Well, I shouldn't say easy. It's not easy. But when you are an artist and you are just hit all day nonstop with ideas, that's not your hard part. The hard part is when you walking that idea all the way through to finish, even when now it's boring and it's not fun at certain points.
Right.
It's not fun sitting in front of the computer for me on some days. Some days it is fun, but most days sitting in front of a computer for 4 hours editing a video that I'm not even sure if anyone's going to see is not always fun.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But in order to get to a certain place, I have to say, it's just like getting in shape or doing anything, learning anything, getting a degree. You have to be willing. That a bachelor's degree, for instance, any degree, it's really not so much that, oh, you got your degree in that thing, but the employer sees that you were able to finish something. You were able to finish it from A to Z. So yeah, you've got some knowledge from the bachelor's degree or master's, but really what we also see, there was a lot of steps it took for you to finish that. So that says a lot about your work ethic and your ability to start something and finish it. And I think that's what happens is a lot of people, they'll start a YouTube channel or anything. And then after a few months, they spend all this money on this amazing production and the videos look amazing, but it might get 50 views or 100 views. And after a few months, they stop because it's just too hard. Well, you just probably didn't give yourself enough time, Yeah.
Yeah, because I noticed we've been streaming to YouTube, and I did want to say hi to Toby, Lindsay McDonald, great show, guys. He said hand care for hand drumming is essential too. Is that one of your friends, Will? Lindsay,
what's her name?
Lindsay McDonald, Mr. Lindsay.
Mr. Lindsay McDonald.
Oh, Mr. Lindsay. I don't recognize the name, but if I saw an icon, maybe I'm not sure.
Well, welcome to Kingdom of Rock, Lindsay.
Yes.
New viewer.
Yes.
Yeah, and tell Matthew to quit sticking pins in his calluses, though.
Yeah, exactly. How's it going, Matthew? But yeah, so we've been broadcasting to YouTube with StreamYard here and Twitch and everything, and every week our numbers are going up. And we're not paying or anything, but every week. You would think, I mean, we've had big names on the show. Like
You
we had
have.
Steve Vai, Steve Lukather, all kinds of great,
Wow.
Grant Cardone, but the thing is that you think in your brain that just because you have somebody famous on the show or successful, that the people are going to just show up, right?
Right.
There's too much noise,
right,
in the internet.
it's
There's
saturated.
too much.
It's extremely
Yeah,
saturated.
there's too many options.
Mhm.
So there's two options that you can, two ways you can look at it. One way is you can spend the money because you said you got to wait time, right?
Yeah.
So we could just keep chipping away at it, and eventually maybe we'll hit a certain point where YouTube's algorithm is like, this is good content, and we're going to start serving it up to more people. And eventually it'll do that, right?
Right.
But back when YouTube was new, it was easier to get successful doing that method than it is now, because so many other options, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and then so you can do that method, but you can also do the save time by spending money, but it's still time. Even if you have to spend money for marketing, a dollar bill is just, depending on who you talk to, I think it's a marker of time. Right. And it's like you're exchanging time with other people to get items that took time to make. It's just like a marker. And so you're going to have to spend either real time or spend money to multiply your time, which is a better way of doing it if you have lots of it and you don't care about the results.
Well, I think the tough thing is too, it's when I've done seminars for musicians, because a musician could be a complete waste and become fabulously famous. They don't practice, they have bad habits, whatever, but they get famous anyway. I've noticed it's the same thing in the YouTube world too. Somebody who doesn't take it seriously just has that kind of combination of luck, charisma, and the right content at the right time, and they explode. And then you're trying to tell somebody, as you are, Will, you need to work it and, blah, blah, blah. And then there's always someone in the room that goes, I don't have to do crap. I just have to be myself and it's going to take off. It's so funny. But I would say you never know if you're that person or not,
That's true.
I mean, everybody thinks they're amazing to a certain extent, right?
Right.
And
not me.
The problem.
I know.
Mike's
He
ego
doesn't
has
have
been,
that narcissist gene.
No, I don't think so.
He's been through the meat grinder of the music business so many times. He's lost the ego part.
I'm dead to myself.
Yeah.
Nice.
But we all want to think that, oh yeah, I can power through this. I'm talented. You just hear that. And one thing that YouTube has taught us, everyone's talented.
Dude.
Yeah. Everyone's talented.
A lot,
because human beings can do anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent. Somewhere in some village in the top of a mountain in Tibet, there's a guy that could play like Prince you never heard of, man.
Yeah.
Well, and on that, everybody's talented. Let's talk about you nurturing young talent with your Mr. Will's site. Can you give us some background on that?
Yeah. Let's hear about Mr. Will's neighborhood.
Mr. Will's neighborhood. Oh, I like that. Yeah, so it's Mr. Will's Music World on YouTube. If you look it up or if you Google Mr. Will's Music World, it should come up. You might have to type in percussion or William Johnson, but that should come up. I don't know if you have show notes or anything like that.
It came up for Mr. Will's Music World.
Did it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I think it was around 2013 or 14, I took a position as a preschool music educator. So I was teaching Latin and preschool to a fairly sizable private Christian school, private school. And they had about 5 or 7 campuses or something like that. And so it was great. It was so much fun. I think I had about 140 students. I knew every single one of their first and last name. And it was awesome. Every day I traveled, I think it was every day or 4 days a week. I traveled from the morning to lunchtime. I traveled to the campuses and I fell in love with it. That was my first time teaching kids that small for that amount of time. I had done it before, but not that much, in a concentrated amount of time. And I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about that. And at the same time, my children were about the same age. So I had two that were preschool age, and then one that was a little bit older in elementary school at the time. And so I'm volunteering in their school. I'm teaching at this school. And I would also, other teachers would call me that knew that I was a musician, and I would come in and bring instruments. And, I've always been into history. My undergrad was history, and I'm into anthropology and ethnomusicology. So I like to know the history too. So they would call me in, and I would do a presentation and talk and blah, 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 and all that. But anyways, I started realizing that not only did I have something here, but I had a passion for doing it. I enjoyed doing it. But I noticed when I was at the preschool that the teachers were using YouTube to supplement their education, right?
Yeah.
And so, which a lot of people were doing, especially around the time of 2009, 10, but it really started, I think, and I could be wrong here, but I think it really started taking off around after 2010, around 2012 and 13. The floodgates are open. You had all kinds of children's music and anything, really, not just music, anything. You want to learn algebra. There was guys that was their thing,
Supplemental learning.
Exactly. Yeah. So I noticed a couple teachers, and they were using YouTube. And later on, I was finishing my master's. So I stopped the teaching at the school to finish my master's. But in the back of my mind, I thought, I have a YouTube channel. I have resources. I have a skill. I have a gift. I was able to teach kids. I've been teaching and coaching since I was a kid. So I love teaching just as much as I love playing. So, man, I used to coach sports and all of that. So I was thinking, okay, I enjoy teaching. I also have a certain skill set. I'm not as good as some of these great directors or cinematographers, but I have a certain skill set with video. And I was running a YouTube channel, and I was like, I could be a help for some of these students, these teachers.
Yeah.
So Mr. Will's Music World, the name wasn't there, but the idea was always in the back of my mind. I was like, one day I want to get to do that, And so about a year ago, I realized that I was just constantly saying yes to so many things. And this was a lightning in a bottle. This was a thing that I was getting from somewhere that was bigger than me.
Yeah.
And I would talk to my kids about it, and I realized I should take this seriously. So when I started doing it, I brought up the idea. My kids loved it. And I got the idea because my kids, when I was teaching, they used to call me Mr. Will. I don't like Mr. Johnson because it just sounds old. It's like Mr. Johnson, and I should, have like like some uniform, a suit and tie. But it was like,
the janitor. It's like a janitor name or something.
Yeah,
or a history teacher.
Yes. And I don't, even though I love history, I don't want to be the typical history teacher that we all think of back in the day. I want to be the hip, cool teacher, right? So I was like, Mr. Will, and all the kids like, Mr. Will. And so, I was thinking about it, and I was like, what could be a good name? And I was like, Mr. Will's Music World.
It's almost it reminds me of like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood a little bit, or like that's why I made the joke about Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, just because it just like, hi kids, it's funny.
Well, was there any kind of a conceptual shift that you needed to make between in-person learning with young people and engaging young people on a screen where you can't really see their reactions? Or how did you kind of negotiate that difference of media, so to speak? Because you're not going to be there in front of them.
Absolutely. Actually, that's a good question about what we were even talking about before, and running a YouTube channel and doing that. I by no means have it down, and it's still very new, and I'm still working through it, and it's evolving. But it was very important from the beginning for me to think about who the student was on the other side. So just like running the channel, I had to think of who was the target audience, one, and then think of an ideal, like actually have characters. Okay, little Billy is in the 3rd grade. He likes this, this, and this. He can sit still for 5 minutes at a time. But that's what this caveat. So I have these characters in mind. I know who's on the other side of the screen, right?
Yeah.
And so that helps me to talk to that, because I have that target audience and I have the idea of who I'm talking to. So that really helped me to kind of negotiate that. And you know, some of the episodes are better than others. Some are like, I don't know if any of these kids are gonna sit through that. But I've been surprised on a few of them. But it's still evolving.
Well, I think even now for, you know, teachers in general, well, grammar school teachers having to have online classes and having to figure out, you know, is little Billy or little, you know, Brenda actually paying attention, or are they playing Minecraft, you know, in the corner on their phone? So is there any like equation about how many minutes you have before a 3-year-old starts wandering?
The preschool taught me a lot. I mean, my hat's off to teachers that teach really young children, because if you're going to be a really good teacher and have their attention, that means you have some foresight, some organization, because you cannot walk in the room and then go, okay, what are we going to do? You already lost them. They're like little monkeys everywhere. They're gone. And once you've lost them, good luck. You'll spend. So my blocks were like 30 minutes at a time, which really meant 5 minutes of education, right? So because everything else is tying shoes, don't do this, so and so, get off of the desk, you know, blah blah blah, stop hitting them, you know. So, you know, a lot of that. So you have to have already right off the bat what we're going to talk about, not being afraid of having pauses in the conversation and taking your time, and not being afraid of losing the class, but at the same time understanding how to keep it consistently going and keeping their minds engaged, you know? Yeah. It could be a difficult thing though, because especially now, I can only imagine what the teachers are going through, because if you're in a suburban area where there's a lot of resources and there's a parent at home, let's say it's a 2-parent home, then they have someone there to help keep the kids on track. But you can imagine the parents where, you know, they can't. And so the kids are just, you know, there's no one there to make sure they're looking at the screen, they're doing the work, and they're, you know.
You know what, Will? I just had an idea while we were talking, and which is always bad when you're listening to somebody, but it just happened. I'm sorry. So but okay. So check this out. And maybe you've already thought of this. Okay. What if you put together a package to give to every single music educator, elementary education music educator in the United States, for starters. Okay. And it's basically has a curriculum that shows them how to play a hand drum and use some of the different instruments. And you kind of like give a full package solution to the music educators, and then your channel would blow up. I don't know, just a thought. Have you thought like that?
I think of, and I'm curious to know in more in detail where you're going with that. But what I've thought about, if you notice, if you go on the channel, playlists are very important also, is developing your channel like a TV show, you know? So you know, it's like a show. So within the show, there's themes within the show, right? So my idea when I started the channel, for instance, I would have teachers ask me, like, for instance, let's say it's Latin American, Latino American Hispanic Heritage Month, right? So they're trying to find curriculum and resources, you know. So I would have teachers that knew me and say, hey, do you mind coming in and talking about your instruments or Latin percussion or whatever, or do you mind doing a little video on your phone and sending it in? So that got me to thinking. I was like, this is a theme for the show. So my idea when I set up different playlists as I'm building the episodes of the show was for it to be like a curriculum where it says, hey, teacher, it's February, it's African American History Month or what have you. I already have 15 videos. You don't have to go anywhere. Right here. Here's how the brushes evolved within jazz music, you know, how the this and how that. So that's set up. So I think maybe even where you're going later on, even in the curriculum offline as well, is it becomes, the YouTube channel becomes a platform and supplemental, but then there's like, okay, we want to be able to do a little bit more. So then there's all of this offline stuff, as well.
Well, check it out. You remember when we were kids there? Sorry, Mike. I'll get back to you 1 second. You had the TV with the multimedia cart, and they would bring it in, and it would have like Reading Rainbow or some of the different
best part of the day. Yeah,
the best part of the day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So those people, if you think about the politics and business savvy that those people leveraged to get pretty much every school in America to do that on a regular basis, right? With the same shows and everything, right?
Yes.
They packaged it. They packaged it and they made it an easy solution for busy teachers.
Yes.
Right. And they did the
right
thing
there. What you just said. What you just said.
But the thing is, how do you get into a school? And because think about this, you're a kid, you're listening to Mr. Will in your music class, and you love Mr. Will. You're a lovable guy. Everyone's gonna like Mr. Will, right? And so then after they watch Mr. Will for the year, you come to their school and you do a seminar on hand percussion and show them and do an assembly. And the school could even pay you for it, or, whatever. You could have like a whole package where you just, you get teachers, you make it easy for the teachers. But go ahead, Mike, what were you saying?
Well, like everything else, I think teachers are probably at a point where they're going to want vetted content because they're struggling to come up with content for their classes. Let's face, especially with online learning. But I also think that teachers, with parents being so protective of their children these days, teachers want the content vetted. They don't want someone saying bad words, or all of a sudden, a naked monkey dances across the room or whatever. So, or it's just bad content that's not truthful or accurate or whatever. Right. So I think with everything, getting them to know who you are and maybe there's an outside, maybe this already exists where there's an outside educational vetting council somewhere that goes, this person's good for math, this person not so much, that kind of thing. And I think that whether you're doing what you're doing, educating children with the Mr. Will's site, or whether you're just a musician trying to get through the distortion of everybody doing everything, I think, looking for those instances where you're developing a community that trusts you, I think is
and that's the big thing. And actually there are, now, I don't know on a national level. I think this was the issue with even in the curriculum, when you talk about the Common Core, it goes into another vein there, but it's kind of related where there's a little bit of fragmentation, but there's some unifying factors on the national whole with the schools. But there are there are big worlds with the conferences. I've gone to a couple of them. There's big worlds with the you do have the arts councils, and within the arts councils, they're usually attached to the state, the School of Board of Education or what have you. I did that several years ago, but then I never really followed it up as much. So there are ways to do it, but on a national level, I don't know if this really connected. Like if you're in this program, then everyone can go here. But there's ways for them to vet. But what you're saying is very true. And that was my thing, was because I remember speaking to my wife about this. And actually, when I got started with Mr. Will's Music World, when I really started taking the idea seriously, or it started mulling over in my head, is the gentleman I mentioned before. His name is Mr. G. He's a children's music guy. He travels all over the world. He's a published author and great guy. But we had a conversation and he was telling me, Will, because I was telling him how much I love performing for children. And I was at a state of mind in my career where I was like, if this was 80 to 90% of what I did, I'd be completely fine with it, Yeah. And so he was encouraging me, saying, I think, you have the personality for it. You love it. You got all of these things going for you. That's almost like it's a calling. It's like you're a dad. You've already been working in schools, And so I started taking that serious, but I realized that I had, like you said, in vetting, I had to create this platform that people can go and say, okay, there's some validation, there's some legitimacy, right? Yeah.
Well, because I think
ahead, Mike.
I'm going off topic for a second. You guys crack me up with the multimedia cart coming in because in my day, it was a movie projector.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that in those days, probably the local San Francisco Unified School District, maybe they did meet with a salesperson somewhere who said, we've got these videos about this or that. I think some of that stuff was national, like health movies might have been nationally vetted, or those famous driver's training movies we all hated. I mean,
Hey, I came up in LAUSD, and my mom worked with them for like 30 something years. And I'm sure some of the stuff that I was coming up with was like 20, 30 years old. So it was some of the stuff we were watching was probably the same stuff you were watching.
Yeah. I think
it's just you got it on a VHS cassette, and I did
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
Well,
meet Joe. And it's like, it's like,
yes.
Joe's a bad driver.
Joe has bad breath. Why do you think that is, Barry? Will?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh,
well,
man.
Well, hey, we are getting close to the top of the hour here, and we almost solved all the world's problems, but we'll have to continue it the next time. But Will, thanks for being on the show, and
thank you.
I wanted to give everybody a quick go around, so we'll start with Mike since he's over there. Yeah.
Where am I? Oh, yeah. Well, just thanks for being on the show, and thanks so much for reaching out, to kids and having this Mr. Wills, because I think that's, I mean, my mom was in the school system in San Francisco, and she watched the devastation of the arts, in schools because of diminishing budgets and things like that. She used to, she would pay a street musician to come in just to play guitar for the kids, give somebody $5 because there was no help anywhere. So I think anyone out there that's trying to instill a love for music in the next generation, it's so key, because there's challenges. We can't, you never could, but it's even harder now with you can't tell someone you're going to make a middle class wage if you're a musician. You can't fool them so much anymore, because like in my day, it was just about I wanted to be as cool as T-Rex or as cool as Jimmy Page or whatever. That doesn't work anymore, because it's really not that cool to be a guitar player these days. So it's I think you really have to get children young and show them that this is a life-affirming path that you're on, whether you're monetarily successful or not. The skills and the beauty and the collaboration and the friendships you make through this are going to enhance your life, whether you make a dime at it or not. And what you're trying to do to the pure joy of music, I just salute you for that.
Oh man, thank you, sir. Thank you.
And all right, Will, go ahead. You're next. Take us home.
I just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for having me on the show. It's been an honor. Also got two Air Force guys. That's cool. That's really cool. But yeah, it's been an honor to be on the show. As we all know right now, this is what we're doing, right? This is where we're at. Computer. We're trying to do everything we possibly can, because shows have been canceled. We know the deal. So I appreciate every little bit. I appreciate the connection. And love the show. Love that you guys are keeping, pushing through it. And I wish you nothing but success. Thank you for everyone that's been watching. If you get a chance, you can check out William Johnson Music on YouTube. I have a website, williamjohnsonmusic.com. Shameless plug there. But Mr. Will's Music World, that's my heart right now. So I'm trying to grow that channel. It's still very new. And so I'm trying to push that. But thank you all so much for having me.
Of course. Anybody with kids out there, go to Mr. Johnson's music channel.
Mr. Will,
sorry.
Yeah. Well, I did want to say one last little thought I had. I used to homeschool my kids for about 4 years, and we went to homeschool conferences. And the whole purpose of a homeschool conference is to find curriculum. Right. So that may be another thought there.
That is already, that's a whole nother thing that I've already been pushing for. So you are right on it. That's encouraging. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, anyway, but Will, thanks for being on the show. Wish you the best of luck in your channel and your music career. And why don't you, do you got anything you want to play us out?
Oh man,
putting you on the spot.
I don't know. I got a little shaker right here. I don't know what it's going to sound like, I'm actually working on an ebook, believe it or not, about shakers. These are such underrated items.
Teach Kingdom of Rock something about a shaker before.
Okay, this is no ordinary shaker. It's actually got a head, 2 of them on there. So you know when you play a shaker, how you hold it.
Right.
Yeah. Ah.
And then you can put a backbeat. Or 2 backbeats.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
So much to squeeze out of these little things.
Good job for being put on the spot. All right. So that's it for today. Check us out, kingdomofrock.com. Matt Gibson, Michael Melinda, William Johnson Music. Peace.
Peace out.
Air Force salute. Okay, that was good.